Our next session is really going to focus on food as medicine from a community-informed perspective. The panelists are going to share their thoughts on what works and what's needed to build and sustain a community-driven, culturally appropriate response to food as medicine. Moderating this session will be Allison Brown, Program Director from the National Institutes of Health. And joining her on stage now will be Amber Canto, Director of the Extension Institute for Health and Wellbeing, HOP, Wisconsin. Ishmael Samad, the Executive Director of the Corbin Hill Food Project. Paco Velez, CEO, Feeding South Florida Food Bank. Ronice Weaver, the founding partner, Abney Nutrition Consultants. So thanks everyone for joining us today, for lending your expertise. Allison, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Rose. Hope you guys can hear me okay. Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to serve as the panelist today. So one of my hats at NIH is to serve and support our COMPASS program. That's an NIH Common Fund program, and as many of you know, we love our acronyms within the federal government. And COMPASS stands for Community Partnerships to Advance Science for Society. And the innovation of this program is that it supports community-driven intervention research. So I'm really thrilled to serve as the moderator here today. Because the key is with a lot of food as medicine program is the communities and the communities that we all serve. So thinking about the mothers, the fathers, the families that are disproportionately impacted by diet-related diseases, poverty, and food insecurity. So it's really my pleasure to really moderate this panel full of great leaders that are doing a lot of work on the ground in communities and really centering the voice of community perspectives. So really excited about the discussion about what's working, what are the needs, what are the challenges and opportunities related to community-informed as well as culturally informed food as medicine approaches. So with that, I will start us off with our first question, which is, why does your work matter? And really want you all to talk about what your organization does and how they really integrate community perspectives into your day-to-day. So I'll start off with Amber.
Well, thank you so much, and pleasure to be here. Again, I'm Amber Canto. I'm the director of the Health and Wellbeing Institute with the University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Extension, and we are a part of a national cooperative extension system that works to translate research into action in response to community-identified needs. And part of the work that we do is braiding a lot of funding strings, as we have talked a lot about today, but bridging partnerships with federal funding, our Smith-Lever capacity, state and local partners, and then also through a variety of grants, our SNAP-Ed, our CDC Hub, our FNAP efforts, to support work we've been doing in nutrition security for years. And so we have looked at not only nutrition education to children and families with limited income and how to build increased knowledge and skills around healthy eating habits, but increasingly looking at the access and availability of culturally relevant foods from a community-driven approach. And this community-driven approach is supported by some of our national work across the cooperative extension system to really acknowledge systems in support towards a more equitable and achieving health equity. And so increasingly that's the direction we're moving, is how do we engage not as an expert in communities, but as a partner alongside local communities who hold so much knowledge, so much skills, hone cultural assets and strengths, and really center that at the core of our work. But I would be remiss to not also acknowledge the personal aspects and how I show up personally as a committed actor in this space as well. I'm a Midwest native. I grew up in Wisconsin. I am the daughter of a Midwest mother and a Cuban immigrant father. And I saw very early in my childhood and throughout my life the critical role that food plays in our health and our family. And particularly from a nutrient perspective, I lost my father prematurely to heart disease. And that was really formative in shaping my perspectives and, again, how I show up as a professional in this space, but also really in understanding identity of food is culture. Food is our social ties. Food is our connection through so many people. And it's a vehicle in a lot of cases for how we do our work, whether it's health-related or not. And so I think that's really critical when we think about how we engage and we show up in community spaces as well.
So I'm Ismail Samad. I'm the executive director at Corbin Hill Food Project. and a lot of other different roles, but specific to Corbin Hill, the importance of our work, I think, is we're proximate, we're deliberate. We really understand that it does take a village, and that village is those people who are around you immediately, and those people who you're speaking with on a Zoom call, or people who you used to do work with in the past, and you're continually expanding this work. And so that village work is really germane to the work that we do. And so what we're looking constantly to do is challenge, push against status quo, and really ask very critical questions around the difference between food access, food justice, food sovereignty, and understanding when we're talking about those specific things. And also understanding the difference between transformative work and reformative work. And none of it is good or bad, it's just understanding the pragmatism that needs to be had when we're doing this work in community, so we can show up with real authenticity to be able to share with the folks who we are really working deeply with to create engendered spaces that are filled with dignity and pride and conviviality. And so the spaces that we operate in are different as they should be. And when you're talking about the different boroughs of New York City, and so you've got really, we're trying to create these safe spaces around food for people to feel appreciated in a way that has been intentionally ignored in the sort of the status quo thinking of how food comes into our community and how research even comes in our community. Like, we're not just a community of consumers. We're not just a community of researched beings, right? We are an actual community that love to preserve our food and our history and our communities, and we talk about it daily. All right, that barbershop conversation is a real conversation, and it does inform how we move in community. That McDonald's conversation is a real conversation. In some of these neighborhoods, that's all we have, right? And so understanding where we convene, what's defined as a safe space may not be a typical reality in other more affluent neighborhoods or communities, because all in all, research shows wealthier communities are healthier communities. So if we're not building, if we're not working towards in a wealth framing, we won't really be able to have an equitable distribution of health throughout the country in many spaces. So we look at it from that framework constantly, understanding what that North Star and holding ourselves accountable, knowing when we're dropping the ball, and understanding that we're beholden to our community. Our community can say, hey, look, what's up? You played me. And I can say, yep, you're right, we did. How do we fix it? And we take some hits for some of our community partners because, we're there. And we have to understand that that's the role that we have to play. And it's unfortunate but that's the system that we were born into. And until we actually have community ownership and sovereignty, we're going to have to fight for justice while food access is being addressed. So that's how we think about it. That's how we move. And that's what's important to me is that framing, being realistic about what's possible, realistic about the investment that's needed to create sovereign food systems that can actually build a world that is not a status quo reality to be accepted by the people who are habitually excluded. So.
Great, thank you.
All right. Good afternoon. I'm Baco with Feeding South Florida, and I'm going to try to do my best to also represent the 200 food banks and the Feeding America Network, as well as the state associations, some who are here today. Short answer, why is our work important? Because families need us. That's the short answer. Right? Families are going to bed hungry. They're not getting the food they need to go to work, to go to school, to thrive, survive in their communities. Excuse me. But we as food banks, as a network, have been working together to find solutions around health equity, actively meeting, actively finding innovative ways of collaborating with our local communities, with healthcare providers. We've been doing the work for many, many years. Health has always been an issue. And for us, especially in South Florida, where not a lot of people know, Palm Beach is one of the largest agricultural producing counties in the United States, and so is Miami-Dade. So we have a lot of great farmers, not just there, but across the country, that allow us the opportunity to bring in those products, get them out to our families, and provide a healthier diet for those families. Dr. Aditi Malik mentioned something about, she asked, how do we collaborate? How do we partner with private, nonprofit, and public organizations? And for me, that's a challenge. A challenge meaning as she challenged us to partner. And at the Feeding America Network and our Feeding America food banks, that's a challenge we're willing to accept. We've scaled a lot of what we've been talking about. We work with, as Vince Hall mentioned earlier, over 60,000 partner agencies embedded in the community, serving every zip code in this country, fresh fruits, vegetables, lean meats, and food to make sure families have food on the table. On the local level, in South Florida, I can mention a few things. Some things that brought on certain interventions was our research project with Humana that looked at folks discharged from clinics and saw threefold an insecurity rate, three times higher than the actual food insecurity rate in the county. And we entered into a random trial, and yes, random trials have been done, and what we found in this random trial is that food does help. Aetna did the same thing with school pantries, and this was all pre-COVID, school pantries, finding out what that intervention did, if it helped performance, behavior, and attendance, and it absolutely did with school pantries. But it did one other thing. It actually got parents more involved in their child's education, which was crucial for that child's development. Our pantries, our local pantries, and our mobile pharmacy, FARM pharmacy, are staffed by nutrition educators. We want to make sure that folks go into those pantries, one, they have a choice because of culture, because of religious restrictions, and because of medical restrictions, that they have a choice on what they're going to take. Our nutrition educators help those families navigate those pantries, making sure that they're taking product that's going to be healthy and that's not going to exacerbate some of their issues. So why are we important? Because those families truly need our support.
Excellent. Thank you, Paco and Ronice.
Good afternoon. I'm Ronice Weaver. I'm co-founder of Ebony Nutrition Consultants. We're located in Central Florida, the city beautiful. We are a different type of nutrition practice. We're comprised of multicultural nutrition practice where we house African American, Haitian, and Hispanic dietitians in our office. And we've been in existence for nearly 30 years. So we started when I was 5 years old. You know, when my father was diagnosed with diabetes at the age of 17, that's when I knew I wanted to be a dietitian, because his biggest question is, what can I eat? And we realized at the dinner table we needed to transform our eating habits with him in order to help him to become compliant. Because you know, in African American communities, when you see a dietitian and you're not doing what she says, you're labeled as non-compliant. So we took that family approach to assist him with getting his blood sugars and hemoglobin A1C under control. But what our nutrition practice does here in Central Florida is uniquely different. I will say 30 years ago, we were a for-profit organization, and we couldn't just get it off the ground. And we converted our organization into a 501c3 organization, and that's when the light bulb went off. We initially developed cultural sensitive nutrition educational materials with my co-founder, Fabiola Gaines. So we took the food guide pyramid and we put an African-American face on it to educate communities of color how to use the food pyramid. Many people say, I don't see myself in the standard nutrition educational materials. And we did the same thing with the My Plate when it came out in 2010, I believe. We created the Soul Food Plate so people can see themselves in nutrition educational materials so they can make that change. So in 2007, we took it one step further. I was encouraged by our county commissioner to move into a food desert community, into a vacant building that was up for sale, and we had the opportunity to buy it. And the first thing we did was we moved in, and 6 months later we were able to leverage community development block grant dollars. I never knew that HUD would fit a dietary practice. We renovated the office and put test kitchens in our office in the middle of a community where food deserts were, where they had low access and inabilities to pay for dietary services. And it was the biggest hit of Central Florida. And community development block grants only lasted for 5 years. We've been there for 2007. And it's key to our communities to show that we're still in the community when the funding ran out. And so we find other community partners to move forward. In 2014, 2015, we had another aha moment. I saw the city bus go by, and we talked about food access and how do we get more plant-based diets into African American, Hispanic, and Haitian communities. And I said, it sure would be nice if we could do it on a bus, because it's hot in Central Florida, and I don't want to sweat that much trying to push produce into these communities. And I said, why can't we do this on a city bus? So we went to Lynx Transportation and met with the CEO, and I said, I need you to give me a bus. He said, give me a retired bus. He said, no one never asked me for a bus. He said, what do you plan to do with it? I want to gut it. I'm going to gut it out and make it a mobile farmers market and go around to increase access in these food desert communities. And many people in the community said, Bernice, you crazy, don't do it, it won't work. We've been doing it since 2014, and it's wildly successful. We've grown from one bus to now a bus and 2 vans. And we actually really want to spiff up the bus and get another bus. We're now currently working on a dietetic internship program, the second one that focuses on social determinants of health in the community, because it's really important as Black dietitians to educate the next generation of dietitians no matter where you're from. It's clearly stated in the Journal of Dietetics, if we don't educate our dietitians, all of them, on cultural competencies and how to reach different communities of color, there will be some travesties in the healthcare system, and that's part of our goal. And that's it. Our goal is to increase the preservation of cultural foods no matter where our community clients come from, through nutrition education, our 8-week wellness classes, our after-school cooking classes we do with children, our weekend programs, the mobile farmers market, and so forth. And lastly, I'm a cookbook author. I've written 6 diabetes cookbooks for the American Diabetes Association. And that cultural competency also drove better nutrition education for many communities of color.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, and as you can see, there are many different sizes of CBOs represented on this panel. So bridging from the last panel, focusing on investments to scale in food as medicine, can you all share the insights from your organization on how we can use and support community-driven approaches? So Ishmael, if you'd like to start us off. And Ishmael, he's actually affiliated with Daily Table. If you all know the Boston community, that is a nonprofit grocery store in Boston, specifically in Dorchester and Roxbury communities of Boston. So Ishmael?
Yeah, so a lot of different perspectives. So I was the culinary director of Daily Table, and kind of did the planning and scaled up to a couple stores. I since then have launched another market in Boston called Nubian Markets, which was funded by Boston Medical Center with their initiative around health and equities and understanding that funding community-owned assets would lead to healthier communities. And so just from a social entrepreneurial perspective, food as medicine is an interesting conversation because it's in its nascency, and it's important for habitually excluded folks to not be excluded from something that is going to be extremely valuable in the very near future. And we need necessary capital to create models that are going to actually address the needs within our communities, as Ronice said, led by us in a way that will actually get the results that we're looking for on the other side of it, because you don't want to pour bad money into something without actually getting the data that's going to be validated in a way that only true community-facing and immersed organizations can give you. And so it's about who owns that narrative. It's about who's building this current momentum. How top down is it now versus how much is being informed by the community's needs. And it's a very important conversation to understand equity in the beginning phases of designing a new, which it's going to be a multi-billion-dollar business case is what we're talking about. And so really trying to understand the connection between wealth and health, how these black and brown farmers are not included into some of the larger current realities in the food chain, and really trying to know that this is a moment for us to earmark some very clear benchmarks for inclusion for sovereign food systems to participate into something that's being created real time. And so if we can do that now, I think we'll be able to actually serve a lot of people the foods that we want with the type of inclusion that a lot of us have been advocating for outside of being at the table of building a business. And I think that's what we're advocating for. I think it's possible. And I think we just have to be very clear about where the investment needs to go to ensure equity happens along the value chain. And that's how we're looking at it. I mean, if that was at your question, that's where my brain is
that's
at.
Helpful. Thank you. And just along the lines of investments and funding opportunities, et cetera, Amber, I know you work in that intersection between the community and the academic setting. If you could share more about your perspective in Wisconsin.
Yeah, and I can take a market example as well, but from a slightly different position, just given how we do the work that we do in cooperative extension in Wisconsin. We have, for years, had nutrition educators, health and well-being educators connected alongside a number of different partners at a community level, looking at access to healthy foods. And in Wisconsin, we have a rich agricultural history. We have over 250 farmers markets in the state. But about a decade ago, we realized a limited number of those farmers markets were accepting SNAP as a payment system. And so certain groups and populations within our state, though individuals participating with SNAP, were not able to use those benefits at the farmers market if they wanted to. And so we started doing some work and connecting with different partners, different sectors to better understand the situation, and we were being asked to sort of serve and be responsive to this from our community partners as well of what are the models, what does this look like? So that started some of the technical assistance capacity building work that my colleagues in Extension have been leaders in. And just this last summer, we've been continuing this work because we've continued to hear that nutrition incentives could be a primary driver and motivator for individuals to shop at the farmers market. There's interest, there's desire, folks want to maximize their dollar. And so we wanted to get a better understanding, what does that look like as well? So again, of these 250 farmers markets that we have in Wisconsin, 80 accept SNAP. Of those 80, 61 have active nutrition incentive programs. That's a relatively small share of the overall population of farmers markets in the state of Wisconsin. Those are all locally led and community-driven initiatives in nutrition incentive. We do not have a statewide coordinated infrastructure supporting this work. And so we see local models that are working, we see local investments that are working, but we've also heard from the leaders in those spaces that the lack of consistent and systemized funding is a barrier to continuing to increase access and expand access to markets for their communities. And so that's some of the work that we're trying to address and really think about is how do we support that coordinated system and coordinated investment, but really honor the local leadership and community drive and community context that's so critical to farmers markets as a social experience as well, right? And so how do we support and craft that as well? And I think as sort of an academic with a foot in the community world and also in academia, I think that's some of the intersection points where we're able to work with different partners and sort of get a sense of the landscape. But I think be really responsive to what does the community want to know, right? And not necessarily what are we trying to report back to funders, which is important too, but being really listening and responsive to these are the questions, these are the data points that are important to us as a community, and how do we show up and be responsive to that and recognize and honor the data sovereignty that's inclusive in that process as well.
Yeah, I appreciate you mentioning that in terms of data ownership, data sovereignty, and being responsive to the communities that you serve. So another question that we have is about how your organization integrates cultural values and considerations in your programs and practices. So Ronise, I know you'd mentioned the food pyramid that you adapted for African American communities. Can you share more about the cultural considerations in your programming?
Absolutely. One, we make sure that all of the dietitians in our office understand the core values of the community where people are from, what their practices are, what their beliefs are, because you have to meet communities where they are. We strongly believe a bottom-up approach is the best way to reach communities. They get it. They understand funding comes from top down, and they understand when it's running out, people leave. But they are looking for people who are there for the long run and people who look like them. They want to see minority dietitians. We only make up 2.7% of African American dietitians across the country. So who's going to educate all of the masses in Central Florida or even across the country? So diversity is important. I'm African American, but I will never say I can teach a Haitian population the way a Haitian dietitian could. So culture is really, really important in addressing those needs. And we hope to expand that through diversifying our dietetic internship program and reaching many more dietitians that way.
Great, thank you. Any of the other panelists want to take that question?
Sure. So I'll touch a little bit on what was said earlier about working or the funding and bringing in the dollars, the resources. Bless you. So first and foremost, you have to ask the community, right? The community, what is it that they need? Period. From there, as a network with Feeding America, we work in what's called regions, right? So in Feeding South Florida, we have Palm Beach, Broward, Miami-Dade, and Monroe County. So Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale, Miami-Dade, and the Keys. So we work with farmers in those areas, and Ismail mentioned something about local growers, right? So we're in the process right now of getting our PACA license. Our PACA license is in essence a broker, or able to purchase from boutique growers who really can't get their product out to market and actually getting it out to market. So we're going to focus on them. As we are in a not as diverse as New York, but a diverse area. We're the sixth borough down in Miami. So diverse area, right? From Palm Beach, Broward, and the Keys, Miami. We have folks from all over the world, different religions, different backgrounds, and that's why we offer choice. We want to make sure, the one, we're asking what their needs are, and two, providing them with those things that they're looking for. I come from Texas. I was in San Antonio at the food bank there. And one of the things that some of the nutrition educators were doing, to your point, was they were making flour tortillas. Anybody that knows how to make flour tortillas, you make them with lard, right? Well, you used to make them with lard. I didn't mean to upset anybody. I'm not drinking milk up here, all right? So, no offense to anybody. So you make it with lard, right? So instead of gradually moving away from lard, the nutrition educator decided to substitute the lard with applesauce. And that didn't go over very well. It went over like a brick of lard, right? So it wasn't good. So you have to understand, you have to know what the population is looking for, ask them, and then help provide them with those things. And that's where having the diverse donor base that we have, from growers to grocery stores to distribution centers to manufacturers, allows us to bring in that diverse kind of food so we can ensure choice for our families.
Excellent, thank you.
But you also have to demonstrate. They have to taste it, they have to feel it, they got to swallow it to embrace it.
Agreed.
So food is medicine can be very concerning to me if we don't get to the bottom line of the culture of the foods, the taste, the flavor, the profile. Are we wiping away history when it comes to minorities eating their cultural foods? That is a big success to food as medicine. It's got to be included.
Yes, totally agree, and yes. Food is certainly culture, and we appreciate everything that you all do in your respective communities. So we are at time now, so really want to thank you all, and join me in thanking the panel for their leadership and their insights and expertise. So thank you. And now I'll turn it back over to Rose.
Thanks so much, Allison. I'm going to have to steal the going over like a brick of lard. That's a takeaway for me today, among many things. But thank you all again. Just another round for our great panel. Now, I know we've gotten through lunch, we've gotten through the morning. We are now to the point in the program where we have not only a U.S. Senator joining us, but a Netflix star. I'm really excited to introduce to you Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey, who has been a real leader and champion and advocate on this issue, and recently made his debut in the series, You Are What You Eat. So with that, we'll turn the podium and the mic over to the Senator. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. Give it up for this great panel. At least they had one bald man on the panel. I'm very grateful. And thank you for stepping up when you're signing on the sign language as well. I appreciate that. My staff has known there's a lot going on in Washington right now, a lot of controversy, a lot of challenges, but this is perhaps the most important place for me to be, because this revolution speaks to really the focus of what is our country really organized around, this principle that together as a nation we can make manifest through this republic the greatest of human virtue, the greatest of our collective values, this ideal that this will be the nation that can be an example to the world of thriving well-being and incredibly high levels of human flourishing. And so that's why I'm excited. This gathering and the folks in this room, and I really want to thank the HHS for the first ever Food is Medicine Summit. And I want to communicate to you all this urgency because right now, the American diet is killing us. It is causing untold human suffering, chronic sickness, and it is actually disabling our communities from achieving those ideals I spoke about at the top. We are seeing immense suffering in our country. Every month, diabetes alone causes 13,000 new amputations, 5,000 new cases of kidney failure, 2,000 cases of blindness every single month. And the effects of diet-related diseases are causing an economic crisis that really is spiraling out of control. Right now in Congress, we're debating our budget. Well, 1 out of every 3 government dollars right now is going to health care. And the majority of that is being spent on preventable diet-related diseases. 1 out of every $3. In 5 years, the healthcare costs for type 2 diabetes alone will rise about 25% and cost a staggering $237 billion per year. And that's just one chronic diet-related disease. We are in a true economic crisis and health crisis in our country, and that's why this gathering has this sense of urgency. That's why everyone in this room is part of the foot soldiers of a movement that must come. We must embark on this mission and awaken our fellow Americans to its urgency. I'm grateful in my conversations with President Biden. I'm grateful that he and his administration recognize not only the crisis, but the promise of food as medicine. I began to see this years ago when I was younger and had this gorgeous afro and became the mayor of the city of Newark. One of the challenges we faced was the fact that many communities in our city were absolute barren food deserts, places where residents just did not have access to healthy, nutritious food. And we knew that we could do something together as a community to address this. And one of the things we just thought of is we have a lot of vacant land. We are going to grow more fruits and vegetables here in our city and distribute it locally. One of the projects we did was to create the largest urban farm in the entire state of New Jersey. We were going to show the Garden State that we're going to grow fruits and vegetables right on a multi-acre farm in the city South Ward, a low-income neighborhood that was flourishing with incredible wealth of human spirit. I just recently, now a senator for 10 years, went back to that farm, and it was amazing. I met some of the folks that are now using it. It's a community center. And not only is it associated with providing thousands and thousands of pounds a year of fresh fruits and vegetables, just by having a space, it's created community, multi-generational connection, and actually seen crime go down. Now, the first woman that came up to me when I was there was amazing. She had been having gastrointestinal issues that put her on expensive prescription drugs. She had about a $100 copay that she had to pay herself every month for her prescription drugs, dealing with her gastrointestinal issues. And the remaining $600 was being paid by the government, by us as taxpayers. Now, she decided to seize on this new oasis of fresh fruits and vegetables, this farm, and took advantage of the GusNIP program that allowed her to have a portion of her SNAP benefits for the purchase of fruits and vegetables. I was blown away by how much she could get with her SNAP. When this woman started to use this GusNIP program at the farm and incorporate, she told me, a lot more fresh fruits and vegetables, culturally appropriate to her, her doctor was blown away. Her gut issues disappeared. He thought she was going to be on these prescription drugs for life, and she's considered a miracle cure to her gut issues from eating fresh foods that she had access to. Another woman came in, and she was amazing. She blew me away. She was an octogenarian, and she, for many years of her life, was diabetic. But she too said, I decided to source my food from this farm, ate a plant-based diet, and her diabetes went away after years, saving her suffering and misery and expense, and saving us as taxpayers the resources that we're paying for her overpriced insulin. I know that so many of you are hearing these kind of stories every single day. That's why you're here. You know the people who can transform their lives when we empower them with the healing power of food. Imagine if we replicated these solutions all over this country, from South Central Los Angeles to Harlem. Imagine the impact it would have from St. Louis down to Louisiana. Imagine if farmers and health professionals, small businesses, policymakers, citizens were engaged in ensuring that every community in America got a chance to actually be able to eat healthy, nutritious food. That is the opportunity before us. And doing so creates a whole bunch of collateral benefit. We have to be investing in these opportunities. And that's why when it comes to Medicare and Medicaid costs, which go up and up and up, and the fights in Washington are not why are the costs going up and up and up, but how can we pay for it? We know that if you put patients' health first, if you put nutrition first, if you put access first, you not only end the suffering and the struggles of so many people, but you actually see a payment and a dividend when it comes to the enormous costs of Medicaid, Medicare, and healthcare in general. So many issues in this town polarize us. If there's any threat to the United States of America right now, it's the pitting of American against American. The culture of contempt, this idea that the lines that divide us are stronger than the ties that bind us, when that's a lie. This is one of those issues that can make clear to all Americans that we can be united in the cause of our country, human flourishing, the well-being of our families and communities. Food as medicine can be one of the healing movements of our country that help us to understand that we are all in this together. And I'm excited about the bipartisan, bicameral bill that would pilot coverage of medically tailored meals in Medicare for our seniors in the United States of America. It's a bipartisan, bicameral bill. We urgently need to pass legislation like this because the more opportunities we have for these pilot programs, the more we prove what everybody gathered here today already knows. If we focus on food as medicine as a part of a broader federal strategy to reduce diet-related diseases, we must also keep in mind and not forget as a movement where the food used in the programs like medically tailored meals is actually sourced from and how that food is grown. I visited that farm in Newark. It's an example of how local people, local farmers, local businesses, nonprofits and others grow fruits and vegetables to feed their community. Food as medicine programs can be transformative in an economic way by expanding economic opportunities for one of the hardest hit folks in our world of entrepreneurialism in America, and that is family farmers across our country who are going out of business at a stunning rate. You want to preserve our nation's heritage, turn to local family farmers that are doing work that goes back centuries in our country. But this is not going to happen if we keep sourcing from the same massive, consolidated, multinational companies who buy from the biggest producers. It will happen if we create programs that focus their procurement on sourcing their produce more locally from small and mid-sized farmers and diverse farmers from all backgrounds. And for programs that are focused on promoting health, we simply cannot be drenching our foods in toxic, poisonous chemicals. This is something that has to stop in America. I can't tell you how mad I get watching chemicals being poured onto our food in our country that are banned in other nations and are unnecessary and have the collateral problem of polluting our rivers and our streams and affecting our natural wildlife and more. The food as medicine programs need to make as a priority the purchase of fruits and vegetables from farmers that use regenerative practices. This is something that is a movement in this country that a movement of food as medicine can help to support. Food as medicine programs will enable farmers to grow healthy food for their neighborhoods and their communities, and these programs are already, as we see in this country, helping to build resilient local and regional food systems across our country. We saw the fragility of our food systems during the last pandemic. Well, local food systems are stronger and they support the goals of this movement. Now, to realize the full potential of the food as medicine movement, the federal government also needs to make reforms in the broader American food environment. That standard American diet, SAD, we need to talk about that. Americans who walk into grocery stores are being set up to fail. Over 70% of foods on our grocery shelves are ultra-processed, and these ultra-processed foods are calorie-dense, nutrition-poor, and high in salt or sugar. We have massive corporations, these international, multinational corporations that are intentionally formulating these ultra-processed foods to be irresistible. These foods can literally be addictive and are designed that way. And then these companies will aggressively market these foods to our children and others to get them hooked. That is what our children are up against. And it's no wonder that children are now developing advanced diseases like diabetes and fatty liver. For us to look at our children who have obesity rates and type 2 diabetes rates well beyond anything that could have been imagined just 2 generations ago, and for us as a society to say it's a moral failing of those children or their parents is outrageous and unacceptable. We know American parents want healthy food. We know American parents want the best for their children. But the system right now is set up for them to fail. These giant food companies are getting away with hiding their sugar and salt, having deceptive advertising and marketing. They're putting all kind of games into their marketing that are deceiving customers about the healthiness of their foods. And we have an agricultural system that subsidizes the foods we don't want our children and families to eat and doesn't support the foods we want them to. That's why my kids go into a bodega or a local grocery store in Newark and can find a Twinkie product cheaper than an apple. Not because of the true cost, not because of the free market, but because of the system that we have that is designed to set families up to fail by making lower cost, unhealthy, ultra-processed, sugar-filled foods easily attainable, and the healthy stuff that we want people to have access to harder and harder to obtain. The FDA has work to do. We, first of all, need to put the F back in the FDA. FDA needs to mandate front-of-package labels that warn consumers about unhealthy products so that consumers can make decisions in a system that is not rigged against them. Look, I cannot tell you how urgent this is. I'm on this mission. I'm the only senator. When I go home to this incredible community. I live in a low-income black and brown neighborhood. And I love it when I jog around my community, people look at me and say, pick up the pace, Mayor. And I'm like, I'm not your mayor, I'm your senator now. Come on, guys. I see the brilliance in American children. I see their potential to outcompete the world. I see their promise. But when you rob people of health, whether it's because they're breathing dirty air, with my kids having asthma rates 4 times higher than surrounding suburbs, or they're drinking dirty water because of lead poisoning, I get so frustrated. This is why I celebrate this administration, which is doing more for getting lead pipes out of the ground and cleaning up our air than any administration I've served under in my 10 years in the Senate. But the truth of the matter is the greatest threat to my children, not just in Newark, not just across New Jersey, but in our nation right now, is that idea, you are what you eat. And so we are all bound together in this truth. It's a spiritual truth that was spoken of in a different movement. I was raised by parents who met right here in Washington, D.C. Their first date was in front of the Jefferson Memorial in those paddle boats. And I thank God every day my father had the luck and the fortune to meet my mom, and my mom had the mercy and charity to marry that man. And they were part of the civil rights movement. I told a group recently as they were looking at what happened in Charlottesville, and my mom did a sit-in in Charlottesville. They helped to plan the March on Washington here. They were so proud to be a part of a movement that wasn't a movement for black people. As Martin Luther King said at the March on Washington, this is a movement of our democracy, making it more free and more fair for all people because, as King said, we are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in one garment of destiny, that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. That's the movement that my parents participated in. Well, we picked up that torch of this democracy. We, the blessed folks that have come from the baby boomers and the civil rights generation and the greatest generation, we now are on center stage, and we're living in a world where we're seeing our life expectancy not rise, but go down, where we're seeing diseases that were unheard of for our children now become epidemic, where I go and meet, as I did yesterday, with one of the leaders of our military. And the truth that they know is that most of our children would not qualify for military service if a crisis went up because of their health. And where we're all know collectively, it doesn't take a genius to understand that if you're poisoning your body with unhealthy foods, you're poisoning your mind. I've seen study after study of kids' performance in schools and the kind of food they eat and how they're too linked. This is our moment with this movement to continue the larger movement of our nation. Who are we? We are Americans. Our history, as much as it's filled with tragic challenges and wretched pain, the history of America is a perpetual testimony to the achievement of impossible things. And who are we now to doubt the potential of this country to show this world how you can create an environment in which human beings thrive? This great multicultural democracy with people in America having DNA from every corner of the globe, we have an opportunity to show the world, to be, as a prophet from the Old Testament, from the Torah said, a light unto all nations. Don't minimize this movement. The food as medicine movement is the movement that continues the course of this country towards its destiny and its goal. And so today, I tell you, I am enthusiastic. I am excited. I am full of hope because right here in HHS, we're having the first ever this conference on food as medicine. This should excite us all. Because finally we're seeing more and more people come to this common cause that brings people together from urban cores like Newark all the way to our farmland. It brings together the family farmer and the suburban mom. It brings together Republican and Democrat. It brings together fiscal conservative and a person who believes fundamentally every child should have a level playing field to succeed. This is that unifying movement. And so my prayer is next year when we all gather here, that when we come together, the work we do leaving this conference over the next 365 days will help this movement spread. Will bring energy and excitement. We'll get more people to join us, that will make our ancestors proud of how we have continued marching. Not quite literally, but figuratively marching so that the truth of our nation goes marching on, so that the idea of our country goes marching on, and that when our children stand up and put their hand on their heart in their schools, they speak not just to an ideal or a hope, but to a truth, that this land is truly a place where no matter where you come from, no matter where you live, when it comes to accessing the keys to health and opportunity, we are a nation that has liberty, freedom from sickness, freedom from illness, true liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Senator Booker for his passion and his commitment and his leadership on this. We have heard from so many panelists today, from the community, from the private sector, from venture funds, and now today we're going to hear from our panelists to talk about a much more on how food as medicine can be integrated into health plans, grocery stores, and farming production. So I'm thrilled to welcome my colleague Erin McDonald, the Senior Advisor for the Assistant Secretary for Health, to moderate this discussion, along with Stephen Anderson, the President and CEO of the National Association of Chain Drugstores, Tom McDougall, Founder and CEO 4P Foods, Austin Price, Senior Vice President, Highmark Health, and Mark Watkins, Chief Medical Officer, Kroger Health. Erin, thanks so much.
Thank you, Rose. Hi, everyone. That was an exciting act to follow, and I think everybody got the boost for the afternoon, right? We're ready. Everybody's back. So we're going to pick up on a number of things that the Senator shared in terms of ideas, and you'll hear that from the panel. So the first thing I'd love to start with is, what are some of the key elements of how your organizations are bringing what we're considering food as medicine interventions to people and to communities? And I'll let you all jump in.
Yeah, so I'll start. Yeah, Mark Watkins, Chief Medical Officer at Kroger and Kroger Health. So just to echo a couple of things that Senator said, one of the things that I believe is the elephant in the room that we're not addressing head on is this epidemic of obesity. We have about 2/3 of Americans that are either overweight or obese. Poor nutrition is a key driver in that. Also, one of the sobering statistics before we get started, and just to make sure we understand, just at the impact of poor nutrition on chronic disease, it drives not only obesity, as I just mentioned, it drives heart disease, it also drives type 2 diabetes. And if I told you it was responsible for being integral in 13 different cancer types by raising your risk, how many of you would be surprised that obesity has replaced smoking as a #1 modifiable risk factor for about 13 different cancer types? So you had a senator earlier that talked about things like active adipose tissue driving the entire metabolic response and creating an overestrogen effect in raising your risk for breast cancer. So before we actually get started, really addressing just obesity as this, we got out of COVID and now we're dealing with the vast majority of the country being either overweight or obese. Erin, we have something like 1 in 3 young people, if you just look at it, are either overweight or physically unqualified to enlist in our armed forces. So we talk about the crisis of obesity, but need to talk about it in terms of our young kids not only being robbed of their future, but this creating a national security issue for us. You see what's going on in the world. The senator outlined, Cory Booker just outlined some of the things that are going on. So as we see this, especially at Kroger, we've been on this mission for a while. We believe that food as medicine is a dedicated, educated approach to, personalized approach to eating and enjoying food so that you could live a healthier life and to prevent illness before it starts. So we believe there's an opportunity to provide a commercial platform in order to bring food at scale. And so, he mentioned something like being unable to discern what a food label looks like in a grocery store, right? So we have a nutrition scoring system that you can use on your mobile device that goes in and actually gives you a rating in real time of the nutrition density of the food. It's scaled from 1 to 100. It's color coded. Red means go with caution. Yellow means proceed. Just be careful. And then green is eat all you want. So we want that to be represented of your basket. So to make it easy for you to pick the healthy item so that even if a food label is confusing, So I went to medical school, I went to residency and fellowship, and I still get confused by a food label. So this is an easy way to make the healthy choice the easy choice.
My name is Steve Anderson, and I am President and CEO of the National Association of Chain Drugstores. And since we're in Washington, I made a lapse into an acronym, and that would be NECDS, just not to confuse anyone. But we're the National Trade Association that represents just not drugstores, but we represent food and grocery stores like Kroger. We also represent mass merchants, the so-called big box stores that you may have heard of. You may understand that description. And our member companies have 40,000 locations spread out through the United States. And a line that we've used for many years is that 90% of all Americans live within 5 miles of a retail pharmacy. And actually, President Biden used that statement many times during COVID, when he was encouraging people to get vaccinated for COVID at one of our member company stores and in other pharmacies, including independents. I am really struck by the great conversation that we're having about scale. How do we scale food as medicine? And I'll just give you a real quick example. When COVID broke out, our members decided we were going to play an instrumental role in getting our country out of the pandemic. And we gave tens of thousands of COVID tests for the American people. We worked on issues with deploying the vaccine once it became developed by the manufacturers. And we had made a commitment to the White House, and we set up with the White House the Federal Retail Pharmacy Program that put those shots in arms. And because of all that work, we had to change a lot of federal and state laws. We had 11 amendments under the Public Readiness and Emergency Preparedness Act. We have given more than 300 million COVID shots in a pharmacy setting. American Pharmacists Association said we saved 1 million lives. And we've saved the country $450 billion of healthcare costs. I'm telling you that story in terms of how we can scale what we're doing with food is medicine through our member company stores, whether they're drug, whether they're food, or whether they're mass. And after COVID, we decided, our board decided, what's the next big thing we're going to tackle? So we went after food as medicine. And we did some polling. We're very sophisticated in this. Before we go down to a path, we do testing of what the American people think. And as we were looking at food as medicine, we discovered that 85% of Americans find a pharmacy to be accessible. 76% of them wanted the pharmacist or the dietitian in the store, if there is one, to help them with nutritious foods. 73% wanted healthcare screenings for diabetes and other programs, cholesterol, blood sugar. The numbers were absolutely staggering. So we took this to our board of directors in August of 2022, and they approved for us to move forward on this. And then we remarkably discovered the White House Conference on Hunger, Nutrition, and Food. And so we scurried around to develop certain proposals, and we made played a really major role in amplifying what we could do with food as medicine moving forward. And because of that, a year later, on September 28th, 2023, we developed an unprecedented partnership with our group, the National Association of Chain Drugstores, the American Heart Association, the American Diabetes Association, the American Cancer Society, and the Food as Medicine Institute at Tufts Friedman School. And we're now developing programs doing indoor screenings or in-store screenings on baseline issues and focusing on the role that pharmacists can play. And many of you may not know this. You come out of pharmacy school now with a doctorate. You have a PharmD degree, so you can do so much more in terms of pharmacy services going forward. So that's where we are with this. And in addition to, at the same time, we've been working with the Milken Institute on some unprecedented work on how pharmacies can play a huge role in food as medicine. And we're focusing on food prescriptions and other items, and we'll be making a report on that later. So This is a big issue. We can scale it really well if we work through those member company stores, and not just our chain members, but also independents as well if they decide to participate. And just so you know, our membership includes chains with as few as 4 stores to large companies with more than 9,000. And they're the most accessible healthcare provider in the country. Americans see their pharmacist 10 times more than they see their physician.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Tom McDougall. I am the founder and CEO of 4P Foods. We're a public benefit corporation. I feel a little bit like a fish out of water here because I don't come from the health system. I'm very much from the food system. I'm usually more comfortable in boots and in overalls. I sometimes describe myself as a social and environmental activist stuck inside an entrepreneur's body. And I basically just came to say ditto to everything that Senator Booker just said. Because originally my spiel here was going to be something along the lines of, where is the food going to come from? This is truly a once-in-generational opportunity to define and design an industry. And we haven't talked a lot about climate here, but golly, agriculture is a big driver of a warming planet. And I have 3 young children. I had the gift of delivering my youngest child, Easton, earlier this summer. And it really galvanized for me the fact that we've got to get going on not just making our industrial food system incrementally better. In fact, we don't have time for that. We need to build an entirely new system to replace it. And I would suggest that that system, that alternative to an industrial, extractive, often oppressive, as we saw during COVID, fragile, linear supply chain, can be replaced by a regional, regenerative, equitable supply web that's not only more resilient, but it can heal Mother Nature. It can add dignity to the people that are involved in it. So for everyone that's designing and scaling your pilots, not only where is the food going to come from, but what are the values we want to assign to the procurement process, the delivery, the processing, the production. What does it all mean? Because if we get this right, we can really accelerate a massive healing solution for our climate problem. And if we get it wrong, we're also going to accelerate the problem. So what we do, and to the actual question, is I own and operate what the USDA might define as a food hub, more accurately, a food hub network. And what that means is we buy food from a couple hundred small and mid-sized producers here in the Mid-Atlantic and increasingly up and down the Eastern Seaboard. And it's fruits, vegetables, meat, dairy, value-added items. These are small and mid-sized producers who own farms like the one that I grew up working on, where my backyard was a 200-acre dairy operation that's now a golf course. Over the last 70 years, we've dramatically accelerated the size and scale of our food system, but at great cost. 60% of the fruits and vegetables that we eat in this country come from one valley in California. You want to talk about fragility, or the opposite of resiliency? We need to begin to long-term plan for what the next California is going to look like. And so for us, we play in the food as medicine space because we have a couple of warehouses. We buy food from these farms. The food comes in. We pack it up into bags, totes, put it on boxes and pallets, and then we deliver it to school systems, universities, and increasingly our food as medicine partners, like right here in Washington, D.C. We partner with Children's National, where they prescribe fruit and vegetable prescription programs to food insecure families, and we are the pharmacy. We buy that food from socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers here in the Mid-Atlantic. We pack it up and we deliver it to their front door with a very high touch, very open, ongoing communication feedback loop to understand, is it less kale and more collard greens, less collard greens and more callaloo? Let's talk about callaloo. Let's create some recipes, especially if it's a West African diaspora. If we're doing proteins for our Afghan diaspora in Charlottesville, maybe ground beef isn't the right solution, but halal goat meat sure is. And we work with some small goat farmers and have it processed by a halal butcher. And that the dignity and choice and cultural appropriateness not only lands very well for the clients, but boy, are we moving the needle on a local and regional food system development.
I'm still buzzing from Senator Booker, too. I have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, and we brought back the Hamilton soundtrack, and I kept thinking he was going to go, it's not a movement, it's a movement. a moment, it's a movement. So I'm with Highmark Health. We're a payvider, so we are an insurance company in every single segment, and we also have a large provider network in Western PA. And we really, if you think of that common metaphor of social determinants as a stream, we really play at every part of that stream as work with the SDOH caucus on the Hill on a policy perspective, work with the Portion Balance Coalition that I saw here on really consumer demand and how do we change preferences. And then within our own health system, we have food pharmacies at 6 of our hospitals that include wraparound services where our clinicians can refer people on site. We have a deep network with a lot of the local community-based organizations that already do this work and starting to pilot some incentives and reimbursement for those services for our members. And then we, of course, have some medically tailored meal pilots for different populations and then part of the benefit structure. So definitely throughout that entire continuum. And then one thing I loved today was hearing the connection and the intersection with behavioral health too. So one program I love is we have residents, clinicians. Dr. Mark can talk about this. Residency is really bad, is what all my friends tell me. But we have a garden on top of one of the hospitals that the residents run as part of just their balance, and then the food goes directly into the Healthy Food Center and feeds the patients. And then we have a greenhouse we started with a local school, and they've integrated it into their in-school behavioral health program. So those are smaller, but I just love the interconnection with the BH work that we're doing too. But we really come to the food as medicine from more of the intersectionality with the other domains, SDOH domains too, because transportation, financial strain within one household is not something you can address in a silo.
Awesome, thank you. So I want to, all of you, I'm hearing this across perspectives that you're sharing, that you all see the value in this work. You're committed to it, you're doing it, your partners are doing it, you're talking about the values, right? And you're putting that into action. So if we're thinking about, this is a room full of incredible thought partners and people moving out, the ideas equally. There's a whole world out there of other partners that would really be valuable to be part of this conversation. So as folks that have started and are advancing the ideas, how do we help other partners, especially those that are payers or retailers or other system leaders, see the value proposition and think about those upstream issues and not just be aware of them, but how do they come to food as medicine in the way that all of you have started or are doing that work?
I think it's about threefold, right? And I think it has to start with things like continued research and advocacy. It needs to be able to meet people where they are, understanding that this is going to take all of us. And let me just unpackage this very, very quickly to let the audience know what I mean by that. Kroger is very proud as the nation's oldest traditional grocer, been around for a little bit more than 140 years. And we take the health of communities very, very seriously, right? So understanding that we want to help not only to help people live healthier lives, but we also want to change the way America eats. And my opening comments were really centered around that we really are participating in sick care rather than health care right now. When you have 6 out of 10 Americans have a chronic disease, 4 out of 10 have more than 2. That's why we became the inaugural founding sponsors of the AHA's Healthcare by Food initiative, where we're advocating for things like food prescriptions and healthy food in the healthcare setting to treat and manage disease. Also to address things like preventing disease before it starts. And so one of the things we're doing around advocacy is that we've been a staunch supporter of the Medical Nutrition Therapy Act, H.R. Bill 6407 and Senate Bill 3297, which broadens the ability for registered dietitians to deliver care in the pre-disease space, also to begin to recognize them as providers, but also perform and provide a payment model for what I believe are some of the most underutilized professionals that we have. It can no longer be that we put the onus of improving America's health on the backs of physicians. I am one. I will tell you, we have a system that's perfectly designed for the results that we get. Let me say it one more time. Perfectly designed for the results we get. We are at the bottom of industrialized nations in terms of quality, but we spend the most, right? We heard that earlier today. So how do we then create sustainable solutions that begin to elevate others, to include pharmacists in their ability to reach the vast majority of Americans? Just like Steve said, right? They are some of the most accessible healthcare providers in America. So understanding how could they be part of looking at a comprehensive medication review, right? And then deciding, oh, Mrs. Jones may benefit from talking to a dietitian, and let that referral happen. It sounds too much like right, but that makes a lot of sense. And then finally, we're committed to understanding that it's going to take all of us, that healthcare cannot be generalizable. It needs to be personalized. We continue to commit efforts and resources around our commitment to diversified dietetics, where we understand how culturally relevant and competent professionals in that space need to connect with patients on an emotional and personalized level. And I'll close and turn it over to the rest of my panel. We also recognize that shoppers have choice, but being in stores can be awfully confusing. How do I know this is healthy for me? How do I know this is the right choice for our family? But one of the things that we're doing upstream is really putting pressure and having really good conversations with consumer packaged goods by saying, give us healthier SKUs in our stores, right? Give us a format of foods that are healthier. And real simple, let's lower the added sugar. Let's reduce the saturated fat. Let's reduce the sodium. We've took the first step with our private selection brands, our own brands, to create a healthier format. So we're asking these CPGs to do the same in order to have a shelf space, right? Because consumers want it. And we know that consumers really don't want to pay more for the foods that they buy. Let's just make it easier for them to get the foods that they want and make it healthy for them.
One of the areas where we need the most help is all those services that I mentioned to you. We don't get reimbursed for a lot of those services because pharmacists, for some bizarre reason, aren't designated as healthcare providers under Medicare Part B of the Social Security Act. We're starting down a path with legislation that will allow us to provide the services that we want to and need to provide to the American people. There's legislation that's been introduced. It's the Equitable Community Access to Pharmacist Services Act, bipartisan legislation. Like almost all of our bills are bipartisan moving forward. We've got about 115 co-sponsors in both the House and the Senate on the bill. One of the other areas that we heard earlier, and we hear this quite often, that we spend more than any country in the world per capita for healthcare, and we have the worst outcomes. And you see that in rising obesity rates. You see that in all of the probably 10 causes of death. Heart disease, cancer, diabetes is right up there, but I could probably make the case for about 7 of those causes of death is related to obesity in one way or the other. And how do we address those issues? By having the pharmacist being able to work with people moving forward. So also, one of the great issues that we're obviously working on, and it was mentioned in a previous panel, on value-based healthcare. And as we move from fee to service, there's nothing that is better for food as medicine than focusing on value-based healthcare, where you're talking about preventative services before the disease gets worse.
Yeah, as I feel closer to it as a payer, and I think we're all in the room because this is a classic wrong pockets problem where there's absolutely value, but it doesn't accrue necessarily to who pays it. And the further you get upstream, the more that that's the case, even though that's absolutely, as a society and taxpayers, where we should be making the investment. And so some things I've seen really courageous funders on the philanthropic side do is make an impact investment or with the CRA through banks and say, look, we're going to work on this community. And if you see savings for your members, you're going to plow it back into this fund and we'll be able to reach more people. That's courageous, and that can help solve the wrong pockets problem. And then I think the leader of the North Carolina Medicaid program that was on the stage here earlier there are some real infrastructure challenges where we have a network, we're paying CBOs for closing that loop. We've integrated it to the electronic health record system. So clinician, Dr. Mark, not probably a nurse practitioner, because sorry, doctor, but they give the best, that's the best PCP you're gonna get as your nurse practitioner or your physician's assistant. But so that they can make that referral in real time, see if it's been resolved. But to scale that, we need a common infrastructure because it's gonna crush the CBOs if they have to do one-off invoices for every single payer. It's going to crush the providers if they have to do one-off assessments that are different for every single payer. And that goes both to the data infrastructure and some of the components that HHS can address. But I think that infrastructure component is really important.
You know, maybe you and I were talking at one of the breaks about, how do you deploy at scale something like a fintech solution that could address what you're just speaking about so that you don't put the onus on the community-based organizations. So we've been working through our coalition and collaboration with some of the fintech providers around a smart benefit card that just does that allows those benefits to be adjudicated much like a claim would be, but not to put the onus down to the nonprofit or the CBO that's been already in the community doing those things, so that they can continue to do the good work that they're doing, and do it without all the red tape that many of us in the provider world are dealing with from a reimbursement perspective.
Yeah, I mean, the question was how to get others to the table, right? And we found as a CBO in many ways, and on behalf of the other CBOs that we work closely with, just tremendous power, to state the obvious, in unlikely allies. One of the examples that we've come across is the more and more we're like, hey, what are you doing for food as medicine? Are you in food as medicine? We're deep now into a pilot with the United States Postal Service. Wouldn't have thought of them, but we're piloting a thing called Farmer Post in collaboration with the World Wildlife Fund. Because when we think about scale and deploying these solutions at scale, there is but one distribution organization that touches every single mailbox in this country. It's not FedEx, it's not Amazon, it's not UPS, it is the United States Postal Service. And we're exploring ways to deliver healthy fresh fruits and vegetables in their infrastructure, supporting their labor unions, and they're stoked about it, and so are we. So this idea of unlikely allies, I heard and saw the eye rolls when I was suggesting that local small farmers could maybe do this work. On behalf of local small and mid-sized farmers, let me tell you, we are open for business. We have scaled. The COVID crisis, we were the frontline workers right alongside all of you guys in the healthcare system. When I started my company, there were 70-something food hubs in the country. There's now 450-some-odd food hubs in the country in every single state. We represent over 30,000 smallholder farmers and billions of dollars of transactions every year. Now, that's broken up against all those farmers, but in aggregate, we have grown up. We are sophisticated enough. We're receiving, deploying, and deploying funding into our technology systems so that when HIPAA compliance conversations come up, we're right there with you. So call your local food hub, and if you don't know them, call me. I'll put you in touch.
All right. So I'm going to take us out just with one. We're going to do a rapid fire because we're coming short on time. Good conversation. So can each of you quickly, or those who are inspired, share what's your one bright spot or wish that either HHS can really support to support greater action, or that you're really looking at as we're looking at what's ahead?
Mandate values-based procurement. center this idea of both Mother Earth and the people that actually produce, process, distribute, and manage our food. 7 of the 10 lowest paying jobs in this country are in the food system. The people that are going to be receiving this intervention are sick because of the food system. Let's change the way that we do procurement for this industry that we're in the process of creating so that we don't reinvent the same wheel.
So I'll be very brief. The HHS can continue to support the Medical Nutrition Therapy Act, increase access to care, help dietitians and pharmacists practice as part of the larger healthcare ecosystem, address things like payment parity for that group. Also, really think about approving easy-to-read food labels, make that easy for folks. And then, like we've been doing, help to take away some of the red tape around access to things like EBT, SNAP, and WIC. Take away the red tape and let folks really utilize those benefits when they need them.
Mine would be to support provider status for pharmacy under Medicare Part B. I think the American people would be shocked to know that the federal government does not recognize pharmacists as a healthcare provider, especially with everything they did with COVID and the number of immunizations that we can now give. And we're many times the most accessible healthcare provider in many communities, rural communities, and also we're very engaged in health equity that came out here. I mentioned the 300 million COVID shots that we gave. 40% of those were in what CDC would classify minority or ethnic, racial and ethnic minorities. And so that's pretty amazing. What we did when we were moving forward with COVID, we took the socially vulnerable index map and put on top another map on top of every pharmacy in the country. And it was amazing how accessible pharmacy is to those most in need.
Thank you. Austin, quick take that.
I got a really nerdy one, which is every regulatory body is thinking about different codes where there's LOINC, SNOMED, Z code, and G code, depending on which one you're. So reconciling that would be massively helpful at this end of the spectrum. And then my kind of Senator Booker American apple pie one is a community health workers as a national platform, because both urban and rural areas, we need healthcare workers that are from the community that we can drive all of these interventions and build trust and higher engagement. So community health workers are something that we can address all of this, and a really critical point we didn't get to today.
Thank you all. This is such a pleasure. So we're going to exit stage left. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you again to our wonderful panel. And I don't know how it has happened, but we are at our final session of the day. So I really want to thank everybody and turn to a conversation with our next panel that's really focused on what it means for providers and clinicians to be educated and trained on food as medicine. We're going to hear from educators on the importance of requiring food as medicine into provider curriculums and how some organizations and programs have done effectively just that. So really some best practices here. So I'd like to welcome to the stage Carrie Cotright, the Program Director at USDA, to moderate the conversation. And with her we have Jennifer Trillick from the University of South Carolina School of Medicine, Greenville, David Eisenberg, Teaching Kitchen Collaborative in Harvard, T.H. Chan, School of Public Health, and Stephen DeVries, Executive Director at Gaples Institute of Nutrition and Lifestyle Education. Thanks, and Carrie, over to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm so glad that you are here and that you stayed, because you're in for a lively discussion. So I am Kari Cartwright. I'm the Director of Nutrition Security and Health Equity at USDA, and we're so excited to talk about education. That's an essential component of this discussion of food as medicine, and as a professor, as a community engaged researcher, registered dietitian, and now in this role, I'm so excited to talk about education, because one of the things that we promote at USDA is that we want a warm handoff from our medical professionals for our programs like SNAP and WIC. And that is so important, and we know how much we need to train our medical professionals and partner with registered dietitians, which has been mentioned throughout. And so we also want for our medical professionals to be able to promote tools like MyPlate, which is our federal tool for healthy eating. So I'm going to start with David. And David, I'll have you introduce yourself. But I want you to talk about what are the training requirements for our medical professionals?
Kari, thank you. And thanks everyone for staying in there. A little bit of context. My father and grandfather were professional bakers in Brooklyn. I spent my weekends growing up at my father's side in the bakery because it was the only time I could see him. And I learned to bake and cook and the joy of making delicious food for other people before I could read or ride a bicycle. I love to cook. It's my hobby. It's the way I express myself. I've cooked every day of my life. Sadly, when I was 10 and my dad was 39, he died suddenly of a heart attack. My 3 then living grandparents all died within a year of his death of unrelated acute illnesses. And as was the custom in the mid-1960s, no one ever mentioned it, thinking the children would be spared of the pain. I decided to become a physician, if only to understand what had just happened. I went to medical school in the 70s and trained in the late 70s and early 80s. Could you imagine my shock at finding that no doctor, no professor at Harvard Medical School ever talked about food? So my first question is, how many of you are surprised to learn that there are no nutrition requirements of physicians on certification or licensing exams, and that doctors are not required to demonstrate competencies in advising patients about food? How many of you found that surprising today? I think the general public would be shocked. When Representative McGovern learned of this fact about 6 or 7 years ago, he set out to fix it. He worked on that resolution that we've heard about. It calls for enhanced nutrition education of all medical trainees and physicians. The exact wording is, it calls for nutrition education that provides skills necessary to initiate meaningful nutrition intervention and referrals, which ensures competency in nutrition for physicians. In March of last year, the people responsible for medical education in the United States and responsible for certification and licensure met. It was called a Nutrition Education Summit. And after reviewing trends in medical education nationally, there was finally receptivity to the idea that teaching medical students and doctors, and most importantly, patients, to make better food choices in the absence of bringing them into a kitchen and talking about food. It was kind of like talking about the benefits of swimming without a swimming pool. The good news is presenters made the case that there are already 50 medical schools teaching this way, with teaching kitchens and culinary medicine programs. But these 50 medical schools were using 28 different curricula. And there was no consensus on what the competencies should be. They were all doing this independent of one another. So the hosts of that summit came together and agreed that if we could identify and create a consensus on competencies for physicians to advise patients about nutrition, they would push it out. We were fortunate to get a grant from the Vitamix Foundation, and they are here today. That consensus has just been completed. The paper has been written. We will work to submit it for peer review, and hopefully it will be published in the coming months. But then for the first time, particularly if the pressure continues from Congress to say doctors must learn to advise patients about nutrition, doctors will finally be informed allies in the food as medicine movement, and welcome allies they will be. That's my statement.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Thank you for enlightening us. And Steve, now I want to turn to you. Why is educating physicians so important in the food is medicine movement?
Well, as a cardiologist, I can attest to the fact that food is truly medicine, and a very powerful one at that. And like all medicines, physicians need to be proficient in its use. And here's a very contemporary example of how things can go wrong when they're not. Last year, the American Academy of Pediatrics came out with a statement calling for the earlier consideration of weight loss drugs for children 12 and up. The same year, a new draft of pediatric program requirements came out that again included no requirement for pediatricians to learn about nutrition. Now think about that pairing. Think about that in relation to what Senator Booker said. What does that speak to our future generation? What direction does that head us to? Is that where we want to be? Instead of food as medicine, sadly, that approach is more like medicine as food. I don't think we can go there. So we need to do better with physician education. We can. There are some other ways, very important ways that physician education can help patients. One is physicians are a gateway for a tremendous number of important services. They include, Dari mentioned the Diabetes Prevention Program. It's a wonderful program, solid evidence, and in fact, thanks to the good people in this building, it's actually reimbursed by Medicare. But guess what? Among all eligible patients, physicians refer only 5%. Why? It's just not on the radar. They just don't know about the program. They don't know the benefits. And then what about screening for food and nutrition insecurity? Physicians generally don't know the prevalence of food and nutrition insecurity. Generally, they don't know how to screen for it. And they don't know what benefits can accrue once patients are screened. Physicians don't know, for example, that approximately half of the WIC-eligible patients are not enrolled. They don't know that 1 out of 5 SNAP recipients who could be receiving benefits or eligible are not enrolled. So physicians need to know the prevalence. They need to know what they can do because that will empower them to not suffer what was talked about, this moral injury of trying to deal with a tremendous harm that they don't know how to address. And then medically tailored meal programs that we talked about today, produce prescription plans. These are wonderful programs that have great outcomes, but I can guarantee you that when physicians are educated about the value, they're going to be referring more individuals to it, and these outcomes are going to be even better. Lastly, I wanted to talk a bit about how physician education will make physicians better team members. It was a study that I led that showed that physicians that receive even a small increment of additional nutrition education are almost twice as likely to make referrals to dietitians. So this is key. This is a team effort. The food is medicine movement is a team effort, but physicians and all the team members need to receive sufficient education to be the most powerful team members they can be.
Thank you, Steve. So there's a lot of hope in what you're saying. So
absolutely.
Thank you so much
There's tremendous opportunity.
Okay, wonderful. So Jennifer, can you tell us how this can be really instituted or done at the educational level?
Absolutely. So I just want to thank everyone for being tenacious and staying here until the very end. I'm an exercise physiologist by training, so if you've ever done a 5K or a 10K or a half marathon or a marathon, you're seeing the finish line, right? So hang in there with us for that. I also want to thank Kari. Thank you very much for having us and having us here for this. I also want to thank Secretary Becerra. I want to thank what Representative McGovern is doing. He is my hero for nutrition and medical education. And I want to say a special hello to my medical students who are watching online from University of South Carolina School of Medicine, Greenville, because I want you to know that students want this. Our future doctors absolutely are looking for this. I am Jennifer Trilk. I'm a professor of medicine at the School of Medicine, Greenville, and University of South Carolina. I'm one of the founding faculty of the medical school. And I'm also the director for lifestyle medicine programs at our school. I want you to know that we opened our doors in 2012, and I had 4 hours of teaching of lifestyle medicine, nutrition and lifestyle medicine, that has now been built up to over 90 hours of required lifestyle medicine and nutrition content across all 4 years of our medical school curriculum. Every single medical student who comes through our doors has that curriculum. Our School of Medicine Greenville, we have a classroom clinic community model to where the students are taught it in the classroom, they apply it in the clinic, and our end users, of course, are our community. When we talk about, I think it was mentioned up here earlier, the biomedical sciences and intercellular mechanistic pathways of how food or poor nutrition, poor diet can increase chronic inflammation and cause chronic disease, or a good nutrition pattern can heal through anti-inflammatory foods and reduce risk of chronic disease is essential. And every single one of our medical students are seeing that. The other thing I want to mention is that medical students of today, they truly are looking for this. When I mentioned when we opened our doors in 2012, we had 1,200 applicants for 50 slots. As of this year, we've had 4,500 applicants for 110 slots. The vast majority of candidates and applicants that are applying to School of Medicine Greenville are stating that they want it to come to the school for the lifestyle medicine program. And that's directly from our admissions committee. The third thing I want to say is that we have an end-of-year report, so a medical school end-of-year report, that is an alumni survey from the last couple of years. I'm going to read it, that 60% of our graduates, and that's across all subspecialties, so that's across anesthesiology, orthopedics, surgery, 60% are professionally implementing lifestyle medicine principles in the way that they care for their patient based on the lifestyle medicine education and training that they received in school. And then 75% of our graduating doctors are implementing food as medicine and lifestyle medicine into their own lives based on the principles that they were taught in the undergraduate medical education. So over the years, I've been asked, what are you doing at your curriculum? How can we get access to your curriculum? And in January 2022, we opened access to our nutrition and lifestyle medicine curriculum through the lifestylemedicineeducation.org website, to where any medical school can resource, download, open source that curriculum. It has been downloaded in over 80 countries across the globe. So it's very exciting that others are seeing that. And then the final thing I'd like to say is that USC School of Medicine Greenville has thankfully and wonderfully partnered with the American College of Lifestyle Medicine as a strategic partner to advance the field of medical education in the UME space, the GME space, and the CME space. And we as a curriculum and as a committee are in the process of reviewing other medical schools from a school level, using the carrot and not the stick, to advance those schools into additional lifestyle medicine training. So from a UME space, they can use the lifestyle medicine curriculum. From a GME and CME space, they can use the ACLM Food as Medicine 5.5 CME bundle. So it's, we're trying to get this from the UME, GME, and CME space, and we're being quite successful at it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that, Jennifer. And Steve, I know you mentioned that there are several things that physicians may not know that medical students are in need of. And so I know you have a program that talks about nutrition security, that teaches about SNAP and WIC and those types of things. Can you tell us more about how we can scale up nutrition education in the medical profession and how you've been using your nonprofit to do so nationwide?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. Let me give you a little tour of what it's like the life of a medical student. Medical students on average receive 19 hours of nutrition education over all 4 years. Now, most of that is biochemistry. So, in any effort to add additional hours, well, a colleague likened it to the Hunger Games. It is an epic battle for each additional hour. So we at the Gables Institute, we are an educational nonprofit seeking to advance the role of nutrition and lifestyle in healthcare. At the Gables Institute, several years ago, we worked to answer this question: how can we develop the smallest possible package of nutrition education that would make a major impact and yet could be scaled so that it could be transformative on a national level? Fast forward to today. Today, the Gaples Institute nutrition course is required, not elective, but required in 9 medical schools, including at Harvard and Johns Hopkins. And I'm very pleased to say that Uniform Services University down the street in Bethesda was our very first medical school. And with those programs, we've educated 1,700 medical students last year. This year, we're on track to do even more. So, what's the anatomy of the program? What we do is take medical students through a journey from nutrients to food to meals. And we do that using the very best evidence-based information that we update, very importantly, every single year. We teach students motivational interviewing to make that knowledge really successfully in terms of being able to counsel. We talk to them about the prevalence of food and nutrition insecurity, how to screen for it, and very importantly, what they can do once individuals screen positive. And also, very importantly, we talk about nutrition for self-care. And all of that is condensed into a 4-hour package that students actually like to do. It's not boring because it's not a slide deck or a video, but thanks to our brilliant e-learning designer, it is put together in a highly engaging, interactive way. One other problem that we've solved, which may not be obvious at first glance, is that the clinical mentors of medical students themselves haven't been educated in nutrition. So what we do at the Gaples Institute is also educate the educators. We've got a Train the Trainers program that has been very successful. Part of that is giving educational resources, how they can help enrich the experience that the medical students have. One of our exercises is a reflection exercise, which we call an aha moment, what the students learned that really impacted them. And you might ask, what could be the impact of a 4-hour program? Come on, what can that really do? Well, if you take 700 hours to develop it and you choose the right 4 hours, 97% of the students report it will change their practice. And even more so, there's published studies, but what means even more are these aha moments. I just reviewed the ones completed by the Harvard medical students that took the Gaples course a few weeks ago, and they are filled with, I wish I had known this earlier. I never knew how important it was to screen for food insecurity, and now I have more confidence to talk to my patients. This is hitting people on an intellectual level, on an emotional level. This, I would say, is how we transform medical education with a nutrition education program that is working at the University of North Carolina and the University of Nebraska. Our goal is 100 medical schools. We're going to prioritize those in underserved areas, and we are just getting started.
Wonderful. Steve keeps impressing me. I just want to give you a round of applause. I thank you. And stretch a little bit. I know it's toward the end, so make sure you stretch a little bit out there. So Steve, I love hearing that, and you already mentioned that, that we need to have team members, that our medical professionals become better team members, and then they can work better with the dietitians as an entire team. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know anyone that is more passionate about teaching kitchens than Dr. David over here. So, and I love the term culinary medicine. So I don't know, I wasn't very familiar with that term before, but meeting David and learning about that has been so exciting. So David, can you share about the role of teaching kitchens in culinary medicine and how it plays a role in the food as medicine movement?
Happily, Kari, thanks. So teaching kitchens, as defined and described by the Teaching Kitchen Collaborative, which is an international organization that's trying to build best practices with teaching kitchens. They're more than kitchens. They're not just places to learn how to cook. First, they're places to teach people about nutrition, what to eat more of or less of, and why. Second, they're to teach people how to shop for food, read labels, understand how to cook healthy, delicious, affordable, fast, easy-to-make foods with their families. Third, They remind people that in addition to nutrition facts and cooking, people have to exercise and move to be optimally well. Fourth, they teach mindfulness and mindful eating and how to live mindfully, because that's an important navigational tool. And last, they teach how to change behaviors when you're stuck, how to build on motivations that make you want to change and sustain change. So they're real or virtual classrooms, and some of them are now remote. You could do it online, you could do it on Zoom, with a chef, with an RD, with an MD, with a behavioral coach. But they're learning laboratories where people learn skills for life. They're not just kitchens. So how is this relevant to food as medicine? So many of the topics we've talked about today that are in the pyramid of food as medicine focus on improving access to healthier foods for people that lack access. Think about WIC, SNAP, fresh food pharmacies, medically tailored meals. These are all intended to increase access. I would argue that increased access to foods for vulnerable populations is only half of the puzzle. The other half is education, teaching people a different relationship to food, how to shop for it, how to cook it, how to eat it in a way that is maximally grateful. It's also a place where people can learn that the impact of their food choices changes climate and climate change and the possibility that their grandchildren will survive. That's what a teaching kitchen does. But I think we need both. So my plea is that as we invent strategies nationally, we embrace both the strategies that will increase access to foods, but also teach people a different relationship to food in teaching kitchens. You saw the kids today in a quasi-teaching kitchen. They're changed forever. Their comments were so telling. It made them more curious. It made them want to cook. It made them try different foods. It probably will change the way they will order off menus and go shopping and enjoy food with their children and grandchildren for the next 70 years. That's what teaching kitchens do. And I would argue that as we build national strategies in food as medicine, teaching kitchens are an essential component to how we make them succeed.
Thank you so much, David. I have a Sioux teaching kitchen at my home. My daughters are 10, 8, and 6, and their palates are very, very particular. So I can relate to that very much so. And so, you know, getting kids engaged early is so important. And Jennifer, you are teaching the students, and you mentioned that the students crave this information and they want this information. Can you add more to that story about the importance of teaching kitchens?
Absolutely can. So what David has done is absolutely incredible with the Teaching Kitchen Collaborative. And I met David back in 2016, I believe it was. So our school had been open maybe 3 years. And I saw the idea of putting a chef and an MD educator or a PhD educator together to talk again about those mechanistic pathways on how food promotes disease or decreases disease processes. And then having the chef explain, well, if we're going to talk about an anti-inflammatory oil like extra virgin olive oil, what is the difference between extra virgin olive oil, light olive oil, you know, so what is that? And I would say that the medical students in my curriculum, they learn it in, again, the classroom. And then we've partnered, thanks to David's idea, with, back in 2016, one of my medical students then was a third year, and she goes, Dr. Trilk, I just had a patient ask me, what do I buy at the grocery store? What are the things that I need to buy at the grocery store? So understanding that they can get the knowledge about the intercellular mechanistic pathways that will help them pass their Step 1 exam, their USMLE Step 1 exam, but that's not necessarily going to help them with their patient care. So we have partnered with a local tech college that has a culinary institute, and we bring the medical students into the kitchen so that they've learned it in the classroom, but they're getting the experiential learning, just as David mentioned, as future doctors. They have a capstone project. Once they learn it, then we step back and they become the teachers, and they bring their patients into the teaching kitchen and teach the patients how to cook. So it's phenomenal, the learning that they receive, and because of that, it helps them translate the knowledge that they've learned in the classroom and in the kitchen into very good patient care. And may I say one more thing? For all of you who've maybe been to medical school, you also may not know that the Liaison Committee for Medical Education, or the LCME, which is the accrediting body for medical schools, state that if you've seen one medical school curriculum, you've seen one medical school curriculum. These are not cookie cutter curriculums. They have to be faculty owned. So faculty owned curriculums. What David and his team is doing with increasing the nutrition competencies allows for us faculty to have the liberty to say, we can, from an LCME accreditation perspective, we can train our future doctors in the way that we want and what works best for us and what works best for our students, while we're able to reach the goals of the competencies.
And you can individualize that.
And we can
at every
absolutely,
school.
At every school can individualize that. And that is what's mandated from an LCME perspective. So again, faculty owned, which again provides like a much more of a broad way of being able to teach the students.
Thank you so much. We're going to turn to thinking and hearing about your recommendations about what federal government can do and federal agencies can do in the food is medicine movement. And I'll just say, as a part of what we're doing at USDA, you can help us as well. And so you are trusted messengers. We want to make sure that you are elevating SNAP, that you are elevating WIC. As Steve already mentioned, we have had wonderful gains in our WIC participation, but 50% of those who are eligible are not enrolled. You can go out and spread those messages. We want to make people aware of nutrition security and health equity and the work that we're doing. And at USDA, we define nutrition security as everyone in our country having consistent and equitable access to healthy, safe, and affordable food that is optimal for their health and well-being. And David, as you mentioned, it's not just about access, it is also about skills. And that's why this education is so, so important. So please continue to elevate these things and messages, and we'll continue to partner and educate our medical professionals to make sure that we are disseminating the information in the best way. And as Rodney said in the community panel, we've got to make that food cultural and flavorful, and that's so important. And you can do that through teaching. You can do that through teaching kitchens. And I love the term culinary medicine. So Steve, we're gonna go down the line, but I'd like for you to say any recommendations that you may have for the federal government or federal agencies to move forward the food is medicine movement.
Thank you, Carrie. First thing, I would say that as a cardiologist, by example, cardiologist or any physician makes more money by doing a procedure for 10 minutes than for counseling patients for half an hour about nutrition. That is absolutely wrong. So the first ask, I would say, is that Medicare needs to change their payment model so that the things that are most important are the ones that get reimbursed. We need to realign incentives in that way. And I would say that second, HHS can really do something incredibly helpful by sending a clarion call to medical schools, to training programs, to say that you have got to train physicians to be up to speed, to be able to equip them to deal with this heavy burden of diet-related disease. It's not elective, it's not optional, it's really not only the right thing to do, but it's a matter of our national health and security.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Sure. So again, being a medical educator for 12 years and watching students go through this, you guys, if we take the time to teach our future doctors, and we have approximately 140 medical schools, we have maybe 100 to 150 students, we're graduating 140,000 future doctors every year. And if we really think about who our healthcare force is going to be, if we're going to teach this in the classroom, if we're going to teach it in the clinic, if we're going to support it from a community-based perspective, if they come into a system, a healthcare system that does not incentivize it, that does not provide the billing and the coding, does not provide the time, it's going to be lost. It's going to be lost so quickly. The other thing that we know is extremely important, if we can kind of reduce the red tape around the shared medical appointments, group-based medical care, that really can do a number of different things. It can provide more education to our patients. It can provide social support to the patients, and it also can reduce the burnout that we're seeing in our medical doctors, for them to be able to educate, motivate, and be their biggest team member on changing lifestyle behaviors. So really, really understanding if we can get to that group-based medical care and shared medical appointments, I think that would be essential.
David.
Before I give my list, I didn't mention there are now hundreds of teaching kitchens in medical schools, in universities, in colleges, in K through 12 schools. They're everywhere, and they're growing around the world. So keep that in mind with this list. First, this has been mentioned before. It's going to take truckloads of money to the NIH, the CDC, the VA, to test these models of food as medicine. But we have to do it, because we have to figure out and address the skeptics who say, show me the evidence. Which work better in combinations, which change behaviors, increase access to local agriculture, and which save money. I think we're going to have to demonstrate. So it's a lot of money. Second, I think that, I should also mention, the NIH has telegraphed through its request for information on centers of excellence and food as medicine. Those are going to cost a fortune. We're going to have to think about, as a government and a people, do we want to have centers of excellence in the United States on food as medicine? Could you imagine how people around the world would view us if we launched and maintained centers of excellence in all the things that were discussed today? Number two, we should integrate teaching kitchens with WIC and SNAP and medically tailored meals, because the two together will be infinitely superior to either alone. Third, nutrition education competencies we've talked about. Congress needs to continue to apply pressure and work with the medical establishment. Emily Broad-Lieb said states could do this at the state level, at the continuing ed level. What if the president, through an executive order, said every doctor who's a member of the VA or the Department of Defense has to learn about nutrition? Fourth, the USDA could have every teaching kitchen connected to a farm. What about every local farm with a teaching kitchen? So people at the farmers market see exactly how to cook that food that just came out of the earth. Fifth, the Department of Education, working with HHS, could take on a big idea, Home Ec 2.0. You saw those kids today. They're different. What if every kid from kindergarten to 5th grade had a teaching kitchen experience? What if that was part of the required education in America for every child? Think of how much disease and suffering we could save and how much money we could save. Our federal colleagues should also continue to do this in a bipartisan way, not for the obvious reasons, but if there's a change of administration, we need people on both sides of the aisle to say, this is an American issue. This is not a political issue, and I just want to echo that. And the last one is, every idea we come up with has to involve people in their teens and early 20s. They are the future. They need to be the co-creators. They will inherit this, they will refine it, and they will sustain it. So we need a youth council. And part of what they care about is how the foods we create and give to them and advise them about in medicine affect the planet that they're trying to save. So we need youth as our co-creators. On behalf of the panel, and I thank you, Kari, but on behalf of all of us, thank you for listening and thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, and thank you, everyone. And in good HHS CDC fashion, I'm going to ask you to do standing applause because we've been sitting for a while. Isn't that great to stretch? And I told you were in for a lively discussion. We appreciate the opportunity so much, and we know we'll move this forward. So thank you to our panelists.
Thank you, Kari.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kari, and thanks to our wonderful panel. This has been such an educational and inspiring day, and we really are so grateful for all of our panelists, for all of you for joining us here. I hope everybody has learned something. They feel energized by the variety of perspectives and the leadership that they saw and felt in this room. I think you heard a couple of times Secretary Becerra tells us do not do mild. We go big and bold, and I hope today showed you that HHS is doing just that when it comes to food as medicine. And we can't wait to continue this work with all of you to make lasting and sustainable change. So really just want to thank all of you. I also want to thank again Karen Marks from IEA and Rachel Fisher and Aaron McDonald from OASH for all of their work in putting this wonderful day together. Have a good night.
Produced by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.